Don't do it. Because if you do, it might be one of the biggest mistakes you could make in your life. What am I talking about? I'm talking about this. Don't judge your story yet, and never in the middle of it. There is always room for you to change the storyline. Sometimes we let the present situation make decisions for us long before we should. We learn something about our life, something maybe unexpected, or something that impacts us greatly, and we take the news as if it's a verdict, like it's written in stone, and that this is just how things are now, or that's how they're going to be, or there's nothing that we can do about it. It is what it is. Often we don't even question if our conclusion is true, or even if the thing that happened is true. Sometimes we take things at face value and maybe there's more to it, right? It takes a lot of time for hard or uncomfortable things to sort of unwind and for us to grow to the place where we can overcome them. Often we learn something about our lives and we let it speak too soon instead of questioning it, and we just believe that's something, or we accept it as the first part of the narrative instead of taking time to wrestle with it and figure out what is the truth and what can I do with the truth. We do this related to our health, our career, our relationships, our marriage, our parenting, our dreams, our mental health, our trauma, so many other things. Sometimes you won't know the truth until you wrestle with it, and that wrestling can take a really long time. It can happen over years or decades even, or it can be much shorter and much more quickly impactful. Some things are meant to be wrestled with. They're meant to be questioned. They're meant to be taken apart and examined, okay? The truth doesn't cost us anything, but a lie could cost us everything. I want to tell you a story, and this story is about the beginning of how I stepped into my story, the truth of my story. And my story, even though I'm 59 now, it was far from being over. I was 13 years old and watching TV on a Saturday morning. And at that time, the news magazine 2020 only played in like really off slots. It was not a mainstream show whatsoever. But a teaser popped up on the screen about a girl and her dad. And that little bit that I saw made me want to hear more of the story. Well, my brother gets up to turn the channel and I yelled at him, and because something inside me told me I needed to see this story. And so I yelled at him and said, "Don't turn the channel." At that time, I think we had like 3 or 4 channels. That was it. He didn't want to watch it, and so he left the room, but I did. And so I stayed behind to watch the story. And the story came back on. I didn't know what the story was really about, but when it came back on, I learned that the girl in the story had been molested by her dad. Well, at the time, I didn't even know what molested meant. I'd never even heard of that term before, but I was about to find out. She shared that her dad had been very inappropriate with her many, many times, and that she ended up telling on him. The context of the story told me enough. It told me all I needed to know, probably more than I wanted to know at the time. I was sitting there in shock. I'm trying to process and with the context, understand what she's talking about. And as I was sitting there processing it, my heart started beating really hard within my chest, because what I had just learned sounded so similar to my own experience, and I had never told anyone because I was afraid. So this girl ends up having to testify against her dad in court, and he ended up going to prison. In a moment, I learned something that I had never even put into words, and as I sat there and tucked it away, I wasn't even sure what I was going to do with what I had just learned. I later told my best friend about what I had watched and what it meant for me, and that my dad had done the same thing this girl had described in the news clip. And my best friend believed me because she knew my dad. I learned the truth about my 13-year-old life through a TV show. And even though I wasn't free from my dad until 5 years later, I had learned something I couldn't unlearn. I held on to what I learned, and it empowered me to make sure that it would never happen again. Inside, I knew somehow this wasn't always going to be my life. Obviously, many things have happened since then, and I've learned many truths about my life. I've grown exponentially. I've spent a lifetime of learning, fighting for freedom internally, and to continue recovering. I can't imagine if I hadn't learned that truth back then, what the impact of not learning that would have had on my life. I'm not sure I would even be here, to be honest. But we all have a story, and that story is important. Maybe your story isn't as dramatic as mine, and I certainly hope it's not as dramatic or painful as my story, but your story is equally important. I could have drawn a very different conclusion from my story that day and just accepted this is just my lot in life. This is just how it is in my family. But I didn't. I didn't just accept that's the way it was. I've had to wrestle with my story and hundreds of truths thousands of times over my life. Because some things live deep in the mind and in the body, and it just takes time to work through them. It's not like a microwave. We judge our story in so many ways, right? Everybody has, as I mentioned, a story, and your story may be very, very different. It had probably tons of different twists and turns in it. We judge our stories in so many different ways. We compare it to others. We judge at how far we've come, and we focus on how far we think we have to go. We judge how high we've climbed. We judge how deep we have gone or haven't gone. We look at what we've overcome along the way. We look at people on the road next to us, and we measure ourselves up against that. We judge our lives and our story by our paycheck, our job title. We look at our marriage or significant relationships. We look at our kids. We look at the things we have, the house we live in. We look at our bodies. We look at the trophies we have or we think we should have or don't have. We compare ourselves with people we think are like us. There's so many ways to judge our story, and almost every one of them would be too small, too insignificant, too unimportant, and too feeble. You can't reduce a person's life to those things. Sometimes the most effort you expand is in the shortest distance, but has gained the most height on the mountain that you're climbing, so to speak. But you can't judge yourself there either, because it depends on the part of the journey you're on. Right? It's some places of our journey are sort of flatter, and maybe we go faster and we cover a lot more ground. And then there's other places where we are exerting so much effort just to get beyond where we are. One of the most important questions you can ask yourself is this: are you in the same place that you were a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 6 months ago? Is this the place that you want to be right now, 6 months from now? Ask yourself that question. I would guess the answer is, of course not. Of course you're not in the same place that you were back then, and the world around us is changing really quickly. And how are you preparing for where you want to be in the future? One of the most important questions I've heard in my coaching training, and it just has stuck with me, is what is it costing you to stay where you are? For me, what that would have cost me, I am convinced that had I not embraced the truth, the horrible truth of what I learned and seen the reality of really what was going on in my life, I really don't believe I would be here. I think it would have overtaken me. It would have overcome me at some point, and I wouldn't have been able to break free. And I know it's a heavy question. What is it costing you to stay where you are? You know, that's a very real question. What is it costing you in happiness, in your relationships, in your satisfaction, in your hopes, your dreams, your goals, your marriage, your relationship with your kids or your grandkids? What is it costing you to stay there? What is it costing me to stay here? It's such an important question. And, you know, the question is, what are you going to do about that? Are you okay paying the cost that you've paid to be where you are? And maybe you're not stuck. I don't want to assume. Maybe you're not in a place where you feel like you're not going to be where you want to be in 6 months. I've coached over 6 dozen people so far as a coach, and I can tell you not one of them would tell you they were okay paying the personal cost or the professional cost they were paying at the time. And that's why they took action. Sometimes it doesn't even take that much action. Sometimes it's just asking a question or searching for resources or going to the next person you think can help you at this point and help point you in the right direction. Sometimes it's drawing a line in the sand and just saying, I'm not doing this anymore. Sometimes it's resigning from a job or doing something that's taking a lot more, it's something different than what's taking so much energy that you did not intend to give it. Sometimes it's leaving a relationship. Sometimes it's leaving a church. Sometimes it's having the hard conversation that you didn't want to have and that you've avoided for a really long time. Every time it is taking the first step. In order to be where you want to be 6 months from now or a year from now, you have to take the first step. Jesus said in John 8:31 and 32 that you would know the truth and that the truth would set you free. Truth is liberating. Even if it's painful at the time, it's very liberating. Coming to terms with my health isn't where I want it to be. My career isn't where I want it to be. My marriage isn't where I want it to be. Whatever it is, to come into terms with that and recognizing what is it costing you right now to stay where you are. The day I watched that news story where truth was offered to me that I could either receive or push away, I received it, and I held on to the truth that I could do something with it to change the rest of my life. Is there a truth that you are avoiding? Maybe because maybe you're afraid, or you found something out and you don't know what to do with it, or you don't think you have any other options. I promise you, you always have other options. And if you are convinced that you don't, let's have a conversation, because I would love to show you the possibility of your future. Maybe you don't think anybody would believe you if you told them, or maybe that those that are in your life wouldn't listen to you, right? A lot of times the things that haunt us or harass us in the dark, we find if we can pull them into the light, they're actually not dark anymore. And that the things that feel like monsters or harassment that's going on are really just annoying little lies that we accepted and we didn't question. Lies that when we pull them into the light, they actually have no power. You are so powerful, and you're far more powerful than you think you are. What would happen if you said the thing that you've had in the darkness that's harassing you? What if you said it out loud and you realize how much bigger you are than it is? Sometimes we don't want to look at the truth because we're afraid of who it might hurt, right? Sometimes it hurts us and we just need to have a good cry. Like, come to terms and be honest with ourselves and feel the grief of the truth and until we can move beyond it. Sometimes it hurts other people because they're the ones who created the hurt in you, and confronting it is really uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable for me to confront my father, and it didn't go well. There was not a good outcome to that, but it's because he did things that were illegal and that were completely and morally, spiritually, otherwise wrong, right? Sometimes it hurts to look at the splinter and get the tweezers out and to dig it out and pull it out and get all the pus out, and it's not always a clean experience, but I can tell you it's a very liberating experience, and we are created to live free. Galatians 5:1 says that it's for freedom that we're set free. It's not to be enslaved by something else. It's not to fall under the chains of other things. It's to be free. We are set free to be free, to live free, right? So don't become tangled. Once you see the truth, embrace it and figure out what you need to do with it. The truth will set you free, but not if you judge where you are too quickly. Because if you judge too quickly, you may not make room for the truth to come fully into the light and for you to be able to see what choices that you have. So again, the truth doesn't cost anything, but a lie will cost you everything. I can't imagine if I had tucked away that what I was really experiencing and I had never told anybody until this point in my life. Cannot imagine what my life would have looked like. Don't judge your story too quickly. It's in the wrestling that you will find out who you are. And it's not going to be always neat and pretty. It can sometimes be intense and messy. But I promise you, in the middle of all that mess, there is a part of you have never come to terms with that is beautiful and powerful and amazing. And that wrestling in that can really help liberate that part of yourself. It's in the wrestling you find out who you are. I'm here to support you in the wrestling. And the next version of you is on the other side of the wrestling. So I'll leave you with that. Be real. Seek Jesus. One of his names is He is the truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life. So seek him and be transformed, because you will be changed. When you see how much he loves you and how he sees you, you will be changed forever. So thanks for watching the video if you got to the end, and I look forward to the next video. Talk to you soon.